G'day, today I'm going to talk about jury service in Queensland. I'm going to walk you right through the process from the first document that you receive in the mail, which is called a notice to prospective juror, right through the process of being summoned as a juror, right through to what happens when you're there on the day, if you get selected on a trial and if you don't get selected on a trial, and then what happens during the trial, and then what happens at the end. Now, the building that you can see is the Brisbane Courts Complex, which includes the District and Supreme Court, and that's where I have done jury service at some point in the past. So I'm only going to be talking about my experience. I'm not going to be talking about any individual case. And I'm not going to be saying what that case was, when that case was, or any details about it at all. So the first part of the process is receiving what's called a notice to a prospective juror. So this will arrive in the mail, and it's outlining a bunch of different things, including the dates that you might be asked to attend, the court that you might be asked to attend, outlining the eligibility criteria for jury service in Queensland, and also asking you if you have any reason that you can't complete the jury service. And there could be a bunch of reasons for that, and we'll go through those very shortly. So this document that you receive is not actually a summons to be on a jury, it's just the first stage of the process. And I guess the reason for this would be to select a wide pool of people. So the way that jury service works is that you're selected at random from the electoral roll. So send a bunch of these notices out to prospective jurors, and then of course some people won't be available or will have reasons why they can't attend jury service, and then that pool will get smaller. So I guess that's their way of just ensuring that they have enough people. So I'll just go through the eligibility for jury service in Queensland. So everybody aged over 18 is considered to be eligible for jury service, provided that you are on the electoral roll. However, there are some exceptions to that, and these may apply to you. So the governor, a member of parliament, a local government councillor or mayor, a person who is or has been a judge or magistrate anywhere, a person who is or has been a presiding member of a land and resources tribunal, a lawyer actually engaged in legal work, a person who has been or is a police officer anywhere, a detention centre employee, a corrective services officer, a person who is 70 years or more, if the person has not elected to be eligible for jury service, a person who is not able to read or write the English language, a person who has a physical or mental disability that makes the person incapable of effectively performing the functions of a juror, a person who has been convicted of an indictable offence, whether on indictment or in a summary proceeding, and a person who has been sentenced in Queensland or elsewhere to imprisonment. And it says on the list here, if you're unsure about your eligibility, then contact your local court. Another thing that might impact your ability to do jury service is disabilities like deafness or being blind, but that's a case-by-case basis, and also if you are not able to understand English, they have another warning here about you need to be able to understand all of the processes of the court. Okay, so that's what will happen. You'll get this notice in the mail, and it'll have all this background information on it for you. So you have two options. You either return the document saying that you are available for jury service, or you return the document and say you are not eligible for jury service, and you outline your reasons. It's a good idea at this point to broach this issue with your employer if you are employed, because that may be something that's taken into account. If being absent from work is impossible for you, or it's going to place a massive strain on the business that you're working for, that may be taken into account. So it is a good idea to talk to your employer. It's also a good idea to think about other commitments that you might have coming up, such as medical appointments that you can't move. Maybe you're scheduled for surgery. Maybe you have study commitments that you're unable to move. And usually this notice will be for 4 weeks. And I'll talk a little bit more later about what that 4 weeks actually means. But you need to make sure that you're going to be available. So after you've done that, and that may come several months in advance, in my case it came several months in advance, you may hear nothing back, and the time period passes and you realise that you weren't selected in that second round of jury service selection. Now that's good or bad depending upon how you view the commitment to do jury service. So you may hear nothing, and then that's the end of the process. However, you may receive a second document in the mail, which is called a summons to juror. So this means you have now been selected to be part of what they call a panel of jurors, or a jury panel. Now this doesn't mean automatically that you're going to be part of a jury. It just means that you're part of a pool of people that a number of juries will be impaneled from. And this may be, depending on the court that you're going to, quite a number of people. Hundreds is possible. So again, on this document, you're going to have a range of information, including the dates again that you're required, the court that you're required to attend, instructions this time to tell your employer if you are working, because in Queensland it's certainly the case that you can't be penalised for attending jury service. Instructions for asking to be excused. So maybe some circumstances have arisen during the time that you sent back your notice to prospective juror, and now maybe circumstances have changed and you need to be excused from jury service. In one case I received, I'm not sure which document it was, whether it was the notice to prospective juror or summons. I sent in my reasons for asking to be excused. A few days later I received notification that I had been excused from jury service. So there's also some frequently asked questions on that document that you'll see. Now, I can only talk about the courts in Brisbane, which is the one in the picture, and this may change. However, for the majority of people, it's going to be Brisbane. That's our biggest court precinct and I would say have the largest number of jurors, but I'm sure there's slightly different logistical arrangements in each court location. So we're now going to talk about day one. What happens on day one? So they will give you instructions on what time you need to be at court. In the case of Brisbane, you are going to go up to the jury assembly area, which is located on level 2, and you'll be scanned in. So your document has a barcode on it and the jury staff will scan you in. Now remember, you're going into court. There's no special entry for jurors. You're going through like everybody else, and it can be busy in the morning, so prepare for that, and also prepare for not taking anything that's prohibited into the court. So it's unlikely you're taking any weapons or anything, but things like scissors or sharp objects, knives that you might use to cut things that I'm sure they come across regularly. So you're going up to level 2, you're going to be checked in. So they'll scan your document and you'll be ushered into the jury assembly room, I think they call it, which is quite a large room. I would say it probably has 200 seats in it, if I was guessing. And you'll be sitting around there for a while, up till about, I would say 9:30 or something. and then they will welcome you, and they will play a series of videos which explain jury service, right from what jury service is through to the processes that you'll go through in terms of empanelment on a jury, and then right through the trial process and delivering a verdict and so forth. That goes for about, I would say, around about half an hour. Now, either before or after that, they're going to read out the list of numbers. So they're going to read out your juror number to make sure, or everybody's juror number rather, to make sure that everybody is accounted for. And then obviously if there's any absences, they can follow those up. So just be aware that they will be doing that during that time. In that area, there is toilets at the back, and there's a tea and coffee area and cold water and stuff in that area. But be prepared to be in there for up to an hour. The next thing that's going to happen is you're going to be taken up to a courtroom. So generally speaking, you'll be going up in groups of about 30 or 40, and you will be going up to the back of a courtroom. So you'll be in there and you'll be sitting in the gallery at the back. And in my experience, it was about 30 or 40. And while you're there, you'll see that the court is already set up. So there's already a judge, there's already parties, so already lawyers, and the defendant or the accused person is already sitting in the dock. And when this happens, you're going to go through the process of impaneling, what's called impaneling a jury. So the associate, which is the person who sits in front of the judge, is going to be spinning a barrel with all the names of the jury candidates, and is going to pull those names out one by one. So they're going to pull them out at random, like a lotto or a bingo environment. Don't yell at bingo. But just say they pull out the first one, and the name is John Peter Smith, juror number 310. If that's you, then they will give you instructions on how to respond, but you either say I'm here or yes, and then that means you've been selected possibly to sit on that jury. So you're going to get up, they're going to give you instructions to walk across the court in front of the lawyers towards the bailiff. And once you get to where the bailiff is, you're going to take either an oath, which means you swear on God that you'll carry out the duties of a juror, so help you God, and if not, you'll do an affirmation, which is the same but without God. Now, one thing that's important for you to recognise is that even if your name gets called out, so the associate spins the barrel and they pull out John Peter Smith, juror number 310, and you say, here, and then you get up and start to walk across the court, there is procedures for you to be excluded from the jury. So the prosecutor may use the word stand by, and if that happens, then you return to your seat and you're not on this jury, or the defence may use the word challenge, and exactly the same thing happens. Now, I think they use the separate wording so that it's obvious who has objected to your inclusion on that jury when they do a recording or a transcript of that process. Now, don't take it personally. It happens on every one that I've been on, and I guess it's just to ensure that there's a mix of people on the jury, I guess. And in my experience, the juries that I've been on have had a very wide range of people on them. So they've been, aged from teenagers through to 70s. And all types of occupations and so forth. A very, very wide range of people. So, once you do that, if you've made it past the lawyers, as soon as you start to take the oath or affirmation, you can't be individually challenged to be on that jury. So you'll take your oath or affirmation, and then the bailiff will assign you a juror number. So they'll say, John Peter Smith, and you'll say here. If you make it to the bailiff, and you take your oath or affirmation, and then they will say juror number and whatever number of the jury that you are being sworn in order from 1 to 12. Now, they may swear in what are called reserve jurors, so this means more than 12. And the reason why they do this is because what happens if a juror becomes sick or has to withdraw for some reason, then they can top up the jury with that reserve juror. So that reserve juror will do everything identical to every other member of the jury up until the time the deliberations start. So let's say there's a jury and they've sworn in 12 members of the jury and 3 reserve jurors, so jurors number 13, 14 and 15. The judge, at the point of asking the jury to retire to consider the verdict, will excuse those reserve jurors from having any further part to play in the trial, so they'll be sent home. So once that's done, then there's another few processes that will take place. Now, but before I talk about that, I should say what happens if you're not picked. So what happens if you're sitting in the back of the courtroom and your name is Michael James McCarthy and your juror number is 163 and your name never gets called out. Okay, or you're one of those jurors that's been challenged. Okay, at the end of the next little process, which I'll talk about, you will be dismissed. So you could either return down to the jury assembly area and you may be taken up for another trial to see if you'll get picked on another trial, or if there's no more trials that day, you'll be dismissed directly from that court to be allowed to go home. So as you can see from what I've been talking about, there's a lot of sitting around, a lot of waiting and anticipation, and it can take some time. So once that happens, there'll be some instructions from the judge about the case. So the judge will give you some information about what's happening. They will tell you how long the trial is going to take, an estimate. And I have been on juries before where it has been less than what the judge has said, and I've been on a jury before where it has been more than what the judge has said. It is just an estimate. Obviously, the judge can't predict how long your deliberations will go for, so, and that, again, has been, in my experience, I've had an example that was quite short in terms of hours, and I've had an example which was quite long in terms of days of deliberations, so that can be difficult to predict. So they're going to give you that estimate, and they're going to ask you if that's possible or impossible, and maybe you might be excused if you're not going to be able to commit for that period of time. After this, the prosecutor is going to read out the list of people involved in the case. Usually this will be witnesses, so it could be police officers, it could be witnesses, it could be other people, experts that are going to give evidence in your case. And then the judge will ask you, after that is read out, to consider whether you know any of those people. Do you have a relationship with those people? Have you ever come across those people? Do you know anything about the case prior to court? And asking you if you think you can be impartial. If you can't be impartial, or you think that you can't be impartial, or you know somebody and you think that might influence your ability to be free from bias or free from prejudgment, the judge is going to ask you to raise your hand. And if you do that, the judge will have a conversation with you, a private conversation, and may excuse you from the case. Never seen that happen personally myself, but I'm sure that it does happen given the small world that we live in and some of the high profile cases. Okay, I'm sure that at that stage, if somebody does ask to be excused, there might be a process of selecting another juror. I've not seen it myself, but I'm sure that will be logically the case, that they might select another juror at that point. Okay, so after that, after the jury, if the jury, they've resolved that process of people declaring that they can't be impartial or not, that's when the judge is going to dismiss the remaining jurors that have come up from the jury assembly area, either back to the jury assembly area to maybe be impaneled on another trial, or they're going to dismiss you directly from there. Now, this could be, court usually starts about 10 o'clock. So you've come to court at 9 o'clock, court starts at 10 o'clock. There's usually a bit of preliminary things that go on before the jury goes up there. And all your empanelment stuff, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And you can see that you're now pushing out to 11 o'clock. 10:30, 11 o'clock before all this is happening. So that gives you an idea of the time frames. So you may be dismissed from there during the day, at this point, or you may be part of that jury. You've been impaneled on that jury. Okay. Generally speaking, if you are dismissed from the court for the day, you are expected to return to your workplace, but that's a matter for you and your employer. You will be paid for the day, even if you don't or aren't selected on a jury panel. So if you attend and you're not impaneled, I think it's about $50 is the fee. If you are impaneled on a trial, you're about $150 a day plus a meal allowance, and it adds up to about $165 or $170. They'll also pay on top of that for your public transport, which in the case of Brisbane, when I'm recording this video, is 50 cents each way. So $50 a day if you are not required for not impaneled on a jury, and then $150 a day if you are impaneled on a jury, plus your meal allowance. And on top of that is your public transport. I think there's more meal allowance if it's dinner. I think it's double. I think the meal allowance is about $15 or $16, and then it's about double that for dinner. But in most cases it will be lunch, because court usually finishes about 5. Okay, after that, the trial is going to start. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the steps during the trial because I'm not a specialist in that area. I'm just giving you general information. I'm just going to give you some things of what you might expect while you are there. The first thing to say that it's very long days. If you're not used to sitting still, then it can be a little bit tricky to manage. Long days sitting still, it's sort of like sitting in an aircraft. You're squeezed right up against somebody. You can't really make much noise because the court's very quiet, and you are sitting, listening and concentrating, which can be very tiring by the end of the day. You'll find yourself, it sounds really easy just sitting there listening, but when you are concentrating for that period of time, it can be quite taxing. It can be cold in the courtrooms. I didn't find the courtrooms to be cold, but they're usually sitting around the 22 degrees mark. But some people do find them cold, so just remember that if you're going to be on jury service. Thinking about the day, in terms of how it runs, expect there to be delays. So expect that court may not start right on time at 10 o'clock. Sometimes they will give the judge that's hearing your case, or hearing the case that you're impaneled on, other things to do in the morning or slotted throughout the day. So, and those things don't always run to time. So yes, you might be asked to be at court for a 10 o'clock start. You'll be there at 9:30 for a 10 o'clock start. But that judge may be dealing with a different matter in the same court, and that may run over time. So you'll just be asked to sit and wait patiently. You won't be in the court if you're impaneled on a jury. You'll meet in the jury room in the mornings. Another thing that you should be aware of is that there's nowhere really to rest properly at the court, so there's no central common room for jurors. You have the jury assembly area, but you can't really access that. It's really only for the jury assembly, and you can't access the jury room unless you're all in there. So it means that you're either sitting in the foyer of the level where you will meet, and I'll talk about that in a minute, or you're outside. And as you can see, the courts do have a nice courtyard and a coffee shop, etc., but it's pretty hustle and bustle. It can be a bit noisy and hot, especially in summer, and it's not it's not like having a work tea room where you can go and sit and relax. I would say that during my experience, I tried to eat as light as possible while I was there and drink plenty of water, because you're sitting in air conditioning all day. And so when I say I ate light, I didn't eat anything fatty or fried or anything too heavy, because that can make you tired in the afternoon. So I tried to just eat, maybe a third to a half of what I normally eat, and try not to snack throughout the day. They give you biscuits and stuff, but again, it can give you the sugar crash when you go back into court. So, like I said, in terms of food, if you are on a trial, so if you're impaneled on a trial, but you're not yet deliberating, so the evidence and the arguments inside the courtroom have not finished yet, and you haven't been asked to retire to deliberate, generally speaking, you'll be let go at lunch. So normally lunch runs from about 1 till 2:30, that's for the court, and you will be able to go from about 1 and you'll be asked to meet back at 2 o'clock. Now, the times don't match up, because you always need to be back earlier and be ready to go for when court reconvenes. Now, the times may vary a bit. It might be 10 to 1, might be 10 past 1, depending on what stage your trial's at. But generally, you'll get an hour for lunch, and by the time you get yourself down out of the court, you find your preferred location. I mean, the good thing is there are lots of food outlets in that area. There's a Woolies, I'm talking about the Brisbane court here. There is a little Woolies convenience store directly across the road. And by the time you eat and make your way back, you've got to get yourself back through security and then up in the lifts to whatever floor you're meeting on. That time can go quicker than you think. Generally, you won't be meeting on the same as you return from your long breaks. You won't be, in the morning, you won't be meeting on the same floor that your trial is on, for obvious reasons. You don't want to be sitting in the foyer while the defendant and the other parties involved are making their way in. So let's say your trial is on floor number 1. You may be asked to meet on floor number 7 in the mornings and after your long breaks. When you do that, your bailiff will be there. They'll do a quick head count, make sure everyone's there, and then they'll escort you down to your jury room, which is located right next door to your court. So take the example of a lunch break. If it's 1 till 2:30, you'll be given 1 till 2. You'll be asked to meet back at 2 o'clock. You'll then be escorted back to your jury room, and you'll have half an hour to wait while the court readies itself again for next part of the case. So like I said, it's lots of sitting around. You don't turn up and you're straight into court in the mornings. You generally got at least 15 minutes of sitting around. There'll be adjournments throughout the day, breaks for you, that will involve sitting around, and then sitting around while court conducts its other business. So in my experience, I have found it to be like sitting in a doctor's waiting room at times. You're just kind of wondering where they're up to, you're wondering how long it's going to take, and you really don't know the reason why it's delayed. Another thing to say that is important is that you're not allowed to discuss the case with anybody. So if you get selected on a jury, you're not allowed to discuss the case with anybody, including friends and family. Your employer, you're not allowed to tell them. It's just best to say, I'm on a jury, and leave it at that. Don't tell them the type of matter, don't tell them where, etc. Just say, I'm on a jury, and leave it at that. Thinking about the jury room, so after the trial has completed, the judge will ask you to retire to consider your verdict, and at this point they'll give you some information about the law, and they'll give you a sort of summary of both of the case overall, what the prosecution says happened and what the defence says happened, and then they'll give you a summary of the law. They may give you some handouts, some pieces of paper with some information on it to help you understand the issues or to summarise the issues for you. Once that happens, you will be asked to go to the jury room, which is located right next door to the courtroom. The room is like a boardroom, and I would say it is big enough. The table is big enough, I would say, for about 20 people, roughly speaking. And it is exactly like that, a boardroom. It has a whiteboard in it. It has a TV screen in it that you can use to view any exhibits with a computer. And we'll talk about the exhibits in a minute. It also has a couple of loungy sort of chairs in there, and a sink with hot and cold water and tea and coffee, biscuits, that sort of thing, so light refreshments. It also has male and female toilets outside of a door in a corridor, away from the general public. So while you're in this room, you are completely sealed off from anybody else. So these particular rooms are soundproof, so nobody can hear what's going on when you're inside. There is a door that goes out to a little corridor that's got the toilets, and has also got an entry to the courtroom. But you can't get into the courtroom without a swipe card, but you can use the toilets, come and go from the toilets as freely as you wish. While you're in there, generally speaking, you'll be provided with your meals, so lunch, etc. I think the reason would be to ensure the security of the jury deliberations. I'm not really sure, but in the past that's been provided. Thinking about the exhibits, so this will be any evidence that was presented in the trial. So it could be items of clothing, it could be documents, it could be photographs, it could be other images or videos that you're able to peruse. They will be given to you by the bailiff, and you can do with that. You can re-watch them, or you can look at the, it might be written documents, or it could be a piece of clothing that you've been given, and you're able to have a look at it. It might be in a plastic bag or something like that, but you're allowed to use those exhibits to inform your discussions. Now, during that time, there's no rules about how juries deliberate. It's up to each individual jury to determine how they deliberate, and the examples that I have been on have been quite different in the way that people approach their discussions about the evidence and the case. In some cases there've been natural leaders, in other cases it's been more of a group effort of discussion. You will appoint a foreperson. So this is the person that will communicate with the bailiff. So while you're in that room, the bailiff is not in there with you. You're not allowed to even discuss the case with the bailiff. But if you need them, you can press a buzzer on the wall, and that will bring the bailiff to you, and you can communicate with the bailiff. Normally what that will be is, if you want to pass a note to the judge, you can write that down, and then you'll give that to the bailiff, and the bailiff will give it to the judge. So there's no rules about how long jury deliberations can go. It's whatever time that you think is necessary for the case. And like I said, a couple of times I've been on jury service. One of them was very quick, a matter of hours, and one of them was very long, a matter of days. in terms of coming to your verdict, there's a whole bunch of different rules about verdicts. So I'm not going to cover that here. I'm just giving you general information. But generally speaking, they're supposed to be unanimous verdicts, either guilty or not guilty. And you will discuss that in the jury room amongst yourselves. Once you've come to a verdict, then you will inform the bailiff that you have reached a verdict. And it may take some time for the parties in the case, so the defendant to be brought back to court, the lawyers to come back to court, the judge to come back to court. And again, the court may be doing other things when you say that your verdict is ready. And again, it's like a doctor's waiting room. You may be sitting around for some time before the court is ready for you. It does feel like a waiting game at times. Once you have a verdict, you'll be asked to return into the courtroom. This time you won't actually sit down in the jury box. You'll be asked to line up standing next to the jury box. And the associate to the judge will ask you, or ask the jury, if the jury has reached a verdict. Your foreperson will say yes. The associate will then ask you how the jury finds a defendant either guilty or not guilty, and your foreperson will read that verdict out, either guilty or not guilty. After that, the associate will ask you all to confirm if you agree with the foreperson. So they'll say something like, so says one, so say you all, and you will respond with yes, unless of course you don't agree with that verdict and you have a different opinion. But if it's a unanimous verdict and you've agreed on that verdict, then you will say yes, but follow the instructions of the bailiff. They'll give you a little rundown before you go back in to give your verdict. Which brings us to the last bit of the case, and this all happens really quickly. The giving of a verdict is over within a minute or 2 minutes. It's very, very quick, and you'll be surprised that you go in to give your verdict and then all of a sudden it's over and you're walking out. After that, receiving the verdict, the judge will basically thank you for participating in jury service and will dismiss you, will excuse you from any further requirements in the case. Now, you've got two options in this case. You can either go back to the jury room, grab all your gear and head home. Or you can go back to the jury room, grab all your gear and then return to the same courtroom and sit in the public gallery. For example, if you wanted to see, let's say you delivered a verdict guilty and you wanted to see what happens next. It could be a sentence, it could be an adjournment for a sentence later on or something like that. You are able to do that because the courts are open unless they are closed by the judge. So that all happens pretty quick, and then you are on your way after that. Okay, so that's a bit of an overview of jury service in Queensland. I think the best way to describe it is, it can be interesting. The cases can be interesting, and you learn a bit about human behaviour and how people think and so forth. But like I said, the downsides are it is a lot of sitting around. It is quite draining emotionally and physically, sitting there, listening and participating. But it is an important part of the criminal justice system that ordinary people are at the heart of a courtroom, and it's something that you may not ever get the chance to do again. So you may do it once, it may be multiple times, and personally I've found it to be a informative and mostly enjoyable and pretty good experience. Okay, that's about it. I hope your time on jury service goes well. Okay, bye for now.